Welcome to the Nerds and Friends podcast. Today we have Lucius Tenebris joining us from the East Coast to talk about all things occult science. So thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited to have you on, man.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be on.
Yeah, for sure. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself and your research and your interests, and we'll jump in from there.
Okay, so I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York. I live in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I've been studying the occult sciences since about 2017, but I started practicing. I started committing to practice, I'd say about August or September last year.
Nice.
Yeah, and I love the occult sciences. I spent years praying about it before I dived into it, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. I was like, I have to pursue this path.
That's awesome. Well, tell us more about what path you're pursuing. We'd love to hear more about it.
Okay, so right now I'm studying under this school called the Black School of Saint Cyprian of Antioch. And the teacher is an occult scientist named Jason Miller. And the style of magic that he teaches, he calls sorcery, because it's magic that we utilize for mundane purposes in the everyday world. And he says that even though we utilize magic for mundane purposes, that doesn't mean it's not still spiritual. So it's a very interesting path. It's a combination of left hand and right hand path practices, and you're introduced to a saint whose name is Holy Saint Cyprian of Antioch, and his story is pretty interesting. I'm sure we'll go into detail a little later, probably.
Yeah. Absolutely. So what drew you to this particular school in general? Like, was it something about the practice that really spoke to you?
That's an interesting question, because at first I was just looking for a teacher. You know the saying, when the student is ready, the teacher will emerge or present himself, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I was waiting patiently, and I would watch different occult scientists that I'd see on social media, on YouTube, or, I'd read their books. I was studying, reading from Damien Echols, High Magic. And
I have those books on my shelf. His High Magic and his Angels and Archangels. Those are brilliant books.
Wow, I haven't read Angels and Archangels yet. I have it on the shelf. I still haven't gotten to it yet.
I'm picking through it. I haven't gotten through the whole thing, but it's a fun companion, especially the way he breaks things down by the tarot.
So so what winds up happening is I also started following this other occult scientist. His name is Travis Mages, and this guy's like around my age, and I was like, oh dude, like this is he was saying that he was going to open he's going to create an app where he put a magical system on it, and he started a Facebook group, and I was like, okay, I'm going to try to get into this Facebook group, and maybe this will be the person who I learn under. But I don't know what happened with the vetting process. It was taking long. Like I was waiting to get into this Facebook group for maybe 3 weeks or so.
Wow.
And I'd imagine, he probably had a lot of people requesting, and it was probably just him alone. So the workload was probably just too much. So I ultimately, one of my fellow Masonic brothers, I'm a Mason, by the way. So one of my fellow Masonic brothers took the course first, and I would see him posting his ritual work on social media. And I was like, bro, that's interesting. And he told me how, he took the course, and I already read a few books by Jason Miller already prior to talking to him about this. So it was like, I was okay. And then he wound up having an opening right around the time that I was looking. And it seemed like the stars aligned perfectly. And that's how I got into his course. But as I look back now and really think about it, I was definitely led here for a reason because I was raised Catholic, and there's an element of Catholicism associated in this magical practice. It's so deep, and I don't want to say too much because I want to give you guys a chance to talk to. I'm sorry, I'm running my mouth.
No, you're the guest here, man. Keep going.
Oh,
It's
absolutely.
fascinating. Yeah.
We brought you here to talk.
Yeah. But yeah,
So-
so tell us how those things, initially sound so opposing, the Catholicism and then the magic and stuff. So I'd love to hear more about that. That's fascinating.
Indeed. So here's an interesting thing about magic. I've been reading a couple of books. This one book that I've been reading is called Pacts with the Devil. It's by Christopher, what's his name? S. Jason Black and Christopher S. Hyatt, PhD. It's a great book. And in this book, they give a historical breakdown of the church and how secretly the church has practiced Luciferic or satanic rites, right? Things such as the Black Mass. Like, he goes into history and says that when you go back into history, there were so many priests, especially in France. France had so many priests, and many of them didn't have a home parish. So a lot of them were freelance priests, and they would perform a mass, for whoever would pay for it. And this would be a blessing. And it was a form of magic, if you think about it, because this is a person who can create change in conformance with his will. And the source of the power is the deity, the Almighty. And to the people, it seemed righteous, but it's magic in a sense. So people would pay, to win, someone's heart and, to win someone's love and affection. People would pay to move up in status, to get a certain position in society, and this was magic. It's so deep. But as far as how the two align, we got to break down the left-hand path and just like Satanism in general.
Well, to jump onto that and onto that breakdown, if we're talking right-hand path versus left-hand path, like with right-hand path, you really have not really the start of it, but the modern era kind of starting with the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And then the left hand being very much the breakaway from that, as kind of led by Aleister Crowley on the forefront. And then you've got and then more recently you've got the split from Carol, as far as like chaos magic, because I've got Liber Null and Psychonaut on my shelf here. But they all seem to be like interestingly derivative of each other. Like, and this is super like 90,000 foot overview, but I think it's interesting that you're also a Mason, because it feels like having like a background in something that does have that Kabbalistic practice would very much lead like you, especially with all the information you've got available, like that's very much a fast track into getting into a more specific and more niche form of magic that works for you.
Indeed. Man, it's a lot you said that I want to touch on. As far as the Masonry, a lot of Masons, from my personal experience, a lot of them aren't esoterically inclined. There's only a select few who actually are aware of the esoteric interpretations of our ritual and our symbols. But your average Mason, like, they just come for the brotherhood, the social club functions and things of that nature. And that's part of the order as well. But what drew me to Masonry originally was my grandfather was a master Mason in Haiti. And I found out years after he passed, that he was a Mason. And when I was younger, he performed a ritual blessing for me. I remember I just graduated from the 5th grade, and I got like a couple of awards in my graduation. My mom was like bragging and boasting, he got all these awards. And he said, tell him to come into my room, after he's done changing his clothes, I want to give him a blessing. So he brought me into his room, and he shut the doors. It was just me and him. And the way that he approached me was very distinct. I never forgot this ritual, right? He whispered in this ear and in that ear. And there's other things he did. I don't want to say too much because
Oh yeah,
I know it's associated with Masonry, but I don't know like what variation. I know it's like associated with like the French Masonry, but I don't know too much about French Masonry to be able to expound to explain which like exactly which ritual it was that he performed. But I remember this ritual, and I remember my cousins came over like shortly afterwards, and he performed the same ritual on them. Only the boys. He didn't perform this ritual on any of the girls. None of my cousins remember this ritual. I'm the only one that remembers this ritual. And that's what first influenced me to become a Mason, because there was a point where I was younger, I was, ignorant, and I would see the propaganda against, the Masons, that they're satanic and they're devil worshippers, etc. And that deterred me from it. And there was a point where I was an EMT and I had a patient who was a Mason, and I asked him questions. I said, is it worth it? And he said, at one point he thought it was, but now he doesn't think so. Ultimately, I wound up becoming, I was a security officer, and my supervisor was a Master Mason, and me and him got to talking. And then I started doing my due diligence. And one of my old boxing coaches was a Mason. I went to him and he introduced me to someone, and, I talked to them, they sponsored me, and then I became a Mason. And the ironic part about it is me and that supervisor, we wound up in the same lodge. Like I wanted to ask him, but I didn't know him too well to, ask him to sponsor me. But we wound up in the same lodge.
That's cool.
Yeah. Crowley, you mentioned Crowley being left-hand path. That's real controversial because Crowley seems to have not entirely abandoned his religious upbringing, his religious thinking.
Yeah, I don't want to like. There's a lot that like the audience probably won't like get out of this.
All right.
No, like because I want to jump straight into it. Like, let's talk theory because I love that thought. I've gotten a lot of my stuff or like my knowledge base of this from Gary Lockman, who writes fast. He writes really, really good magical histories, and he also used to be the guitarist for Blondie.
Oh really?
So it's like he's a dude who like is the epitome of like living his best life. It's like, yeah, in the 80s I was in one of the biggest bands ever, and then he just like he studies the shit out of everything from right hand to left hand to chaos magic and like its current effects on the world. It's very interesting. But yeah, like that, like you were saying, like Crowley very much in a lot of ways he never like it feels like he never really abandoned right hand path. He just really wanted to like make it his own and corrupt the rituals that he saw in at least from what I know of Crowley.
And it's interesting because it's so, in a sense, he didn't abandon his right hand path thinking, but he's left hand path because he was innovative. Because Thelema, I don't know much about Thelema, but the little bit that I do know, they seem to venerate him like he's a prophet. And I forget what his name translates to, Frater Puderabo, but
I will endure till the end.
Yeah. Yes. And when you think about
it's the trivia trap. It's the brain up here. It's like, I know that one.
Yeah.
I don't speak a lick of Latin, but I know Perturabo.
It's interesting because that name implies that he attained, at least the way I understand this, he attained elevated status or apotheosis, self-deification. And that's exactly what is the goal of Left Hand Path, is to become a god, to forge and build yourself to become that. And he kind of seems like he's venerated now that he's in the next life as that.
Raise yourself up to that godhead. That's That's it. I'm interested in what your school's take on that is, because I might be at the right site. Jason Miller's Strategic Sorcery.
Yes, yes.
I'm curious how the school that you're studying applies to that, even in just broad and general terms.
Okay, so to explain it, we have to talk about who Holy Saint Cyprian of Antioch was. Now, a lot of times he gets confused with Holy Saint Cyprian of Carthage, and the two of them lived around the same time period, and they were both martyred. But I believe Saint Cyprian of Antioch was martyred in Nicodemus, and Saint Cyprian of Carthage died in Carthage. Now, Saint Cyprian was originally a pagan sorcerer, according to the myth, and he was a very powerful pagan sorcerer, a highly esteemed pagan sorcerer, and oftentimes people would solicit him for his services. And one account of the legend states that a young gentleman was in love with a virgin by the name of Justina, a pious woman, and he sought Holy Saint Cyprian to seduce Justina for him. Now, the other account states that Holy Saint Cyprian liked to corrupt virgins, and he would oftentimes send his legions of demons to tempt them and to corrupt them to have sex. And which account is the real one doesn't really matter, right? But what happens is he sends his most fiercest legions of demons at Justina thrice, and all three times she's able to successfully rebuke the temptations of the demons by making the sign of the cross. By the third time, he was broken, bitter, angry, frustrated, and confused. And he came to Justina and he says, "How is it that you're able to rebuke my most fiercest legions of demons? What is this source of strength, this source of power that you draw from?" And she says, "It is through my faith in Christ." And then she made the sign of the cross. And it is said that he was so moved by this that he immediately converted to Christianity. And he rose in the church to the status from deacon to priest to bishop. And it's interesting because despite being a Catholic and giving his life to Christ, it is said that he still practiced his sorcerous endeavors. And this is a man who walked the middle path, who gave to God that which belongs to God, but gave to Caesar that which belongs to Caesar. And here's the interesting thing: when the legend says that him and Holy Saint Justina, because she becomes a saint as well, who's associated with him. I haven't gotten that far. I'm only on like lesson 4 right now. But what happens is they both get martyred in Nicodemus. They get boiled alive in a cauldron during the Diocletian period. They get boiled alive in a cauldron, and then they get beheaded. And it is said that there was a guard who was sent to watch over them, and he was so moved by their faith that he immediately converted to Christianity, and he was martyred with them.
I feel like I've had soup that good before.
Like,
like if it's spiced right and they're boiling all the meats just right, like, you know what, I might convert for this. This is some, that's good soup.
Who martyred them at the time? Was it
I think Diocletian.
Oh, okay. Was that a Roman emperor? I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Yep.
Wow. Man. That's a fascinating legend right there.
Yeah. So it's like it's said that he's holy as Christ, but he's more evil than the devil, as the legend says. So it's interesting because he's a spirit that's a go-between. And when you deal with Cyprian, because of his elevated status now, he's now a saint because he's martyred. But he's kind of like an occult pope, right? And he has many different abilities, but one of his most notable, one of the main abilities that he's known for is that he is a go-between for spirits. So he can assist you in accessing any spirit in the celestial realms, in the terrestrial realms, or in the infernal realms.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And I just kind of want to touch on something, because I think that you brought into like an important part whenever you're talking about any type of magical path of the story. Like, there's many versions of the story, and it doesn't matter which is true, because ultimately they're all true, because it no longer matters like what actually happened in this circumstance. The important thing is the story and the symbolism that gives us, and the lessons that actually teaches to perpetuate this, whatever path it is that you're walking, and what you're able to take from that story. And so, like, with any living people, whether the naysayers, the believers, or if it's all completely fiction, the important thing is what it's teaching us now about what we can do.
Indeed, yes. What can we take from this, and what can we apply and utilize to grow and develop? Exactly, guys. As occult scientists, and our goal is to study symbolism. It doesn't matter if this was historically, as you mentioned, historically factual. It's about the symbolism. What can we draw from the symbolism? How can we apply this? It's like, for example, like this path has caused me to really get intimate with Christ and the crucifixion. Yeah, it's caused me to look at it. Like, I see Christ totally differently now from how I used to see Christ. And of course, it's I see the symbolism behind it, but I see Christ as being a being who walked the middle path, who was right hand and left hand path. At certain point, right? It is. At certain points in the scripture, it mentions that he speaks to God. He speaks of God as if he is subordinate. And then at other points later on, he speaks and asserts as if he is the deity, and to me, that's interesting, because the left-hand path, you become the deity, but on the right-hand path, you seek to be subservient to the deity. And it seems like there's points where he alters, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Where he varies.
Yeah, totally. Interesting. That's a really fascinating take on that. Yeah. That's cool.
It comes down to I would repurpose an Obi-Wan Kenobi line from A New Hope, where it's like somebody like, well, do you know God? Well, of course I know it. He's me. Like,
yeah.
That's and that's I mean, that's what I always thought was so interesting, like especially Damien Echols' interpretation of Hermetic Order, where he also very much says like, this is not specifically religious, the way that he practices. The way that Damien Echols practiced, and for those that don't know, Damien Echols was one of the West Memphis Three, who were three kids that got swept up in the Satanic Panic in West Memphis, and they basically were thrown in jail for child murders that they had. There was literally there's no connection, no evidence to them being there. Like, all the evidence pointed to there was actually there was somebody that murdered these children, but it wasn't three teenagers who were in a goth phase. And right. Damien Echols actually, because he spent so long in solitary confinement,
messed up.
Oh, he's got to wear sunglasses constantly now because his eyes are so sensitive to light. And the facility he was in sounds like absolute hell. And he studied all forms, like a great number of forms of different magic, like and Zen Buddhism, and he became he's very much he's a very, very interesting occult scientist in a lot of different ways. And where that links back is like, that's like you could very much interpret how you practice your ritual, and it can be realizing a different side of Christianity that you didn't expect, or it could be like I roll in a little bit of I roll in chakra work, and it's because of the way that in my personal rituals I meditate on the middle pillar, and I do the Kabbalistic cross, and that's focusing energy downward. But in order to do like a simple banishing energy, I do my chakras from root to crown, and kind of imagine it as like a as an equal and opposite partner to the middle pillar. Spoiler, that's what I do in the sauna every day when I'm done with the gym. But like I'm interested. Like I'm just ready to sit back here and just listen to you talk about this shit, man. But like I've also been like the freaking hard nerd on the questioning, so I'll back off.
No, you good. Like, the conversation's interesting. It's all good.
Yeah, I'm learning a ton. This is great.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
So, as far as chakra work, there are meditations with this practice. There are 2 meditations that I practice. I can't really speak on it. I could give, like, I can't tell you exactly how it's done, but like I could tell you what I experienced. One of them is associated with Christ, and you become intimate with Christ being crucified. It's, bro, when I tell you, there are days I can't do this meditation because it breaks you, like, to visualize and make Christ being crucified become alive in your mind's eye, like you're there, witnessing the pain, the anguish, the despair, the wrongness, like, just, and then if you're already like in a funk, like if you're having a bad day, dude, there's days I'm in here, I'm sobbing, bro, like sobbing, performing this meditation. But it's interesting because it's like it helps to cleanse me. And on this path, I'm finding that I'm just stepping deeper and deeper into who I am, into my being, and facing the things which make me uncomfortable, the things that I don't want to face, the things that I'd rather shy away from, and just going at it at my own pace. And I feel like this course, if one is to take this course, they should have some kind of at least introductory knowledge into magic, I would say. Definitely. But this path, I'm sorry, I know I'm like all over the pit.
You're good, man. You're doing great.
Dude, yeah, I'm Tangent City all the time, man. So like I feel that.
Yeah.
I was curious about sorry, not to cut you off, but like I was curious if that journey through your inner dark is what you were seeking out as what you wanted your magical practice to be, or if there was something or if you had like a goal of working up to with your practice.
Okay, so the 2 goals that I had originally was one is truth. Like I need to know. I don't want to believe. I don't want to go off faith. I want to know. I have a burning desire to know. I can't shake it. So that's one of my main reasons for stepping onto the path. But the second reason was for power. I'm not gonna lie. I wanted power. I wanted to be empowered. And what I've come to realize now is that this power that I'm seeking, I already have it. I am that. I understand it. But in order to fully embrace it, I got to go through this shit that I don't want to face, because it's on the other side of that. I have to go through it. There's no other way. And there's nobody that's going to make me do this. You know, nobody's gonna. I can have a support group around me, but ultimately my path is my path to walk in mine, to walk alone. And it doesn't have to look like anybody else's path.
I love that individuality to it, that you can really, it fits who you are. I like that.
Yeah. So yeah, brother. Thanks. Thank you.
Of
So yeah,
course.
brother, to answer your question, yeah, originally I saw power, but what I'm finding is me.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's like it really does seem like it's about the journey for you, which is, you know, really cool. Like when you actually get to the when you get to the point where you realize there's no point, like on a super dumb level, it's like when you realize that there's no such thing as an adult. It's just a bunch of humans that have been faking it, that are like, they're all constantly faking it. And like I personally really hate the term "fake it till you make it" because I think it catchy sloganizes something that actually has like some really good intrinsic value, because like, and it's not so much as like you just have to believe in yourself. It's actually finding the thing in yourself that you didn't know was there. Like you hear about people that go through super harrowing circumstances, whether that's like a survival situation, or they, you know, were able to handle some sort of disaster in an important way. And what you hear from a lot of those people, and specifically people that go through something that's like highly traumatic and damaging, almost universally, those people, if you like when they get asked the question, if you had the ability to go back in time and stop this, would you? They universally all say no, because they're better people because of it. And I've met a bunch of those people who are, you know, have been through some serious shit. And the thing that I like about it is they're still like, they're regular people. Like if in my mind, if you think about a magus, you know, you like most people would think like, oh yeah, it's Merlin. It's like, yeah, but like also think about how Merlin probably, you know, had a few drinks with King Arthur on occasion. Like you're still a person. You have this power that you can access because you are familiar with yourself in a big way.
Indeed,
That's cool.
indeed. It's interesting you mentioned about pain. You know, this is what I appreciate about the left-hand path, because the left-hand path is about facing the pain and plunging so far into darkness that you come out into the light, and you willingly give in to the suffering, because you understand that if it doesn't kill you, it's only going to make you stronger. It's only going to make you a better, more whole, integrated being at the end of the day. So suffering is necessary. I feel like we kind of get a hint of that with the story of Adam and Eve in the garden. And that's why Eve ate of the fruit, because, you know, they had paradise and they were comfortable, and they didn't really want that. I guess Eve was the first to realize that we can't just remain stagnant. We have to progress, even if it means we're going to suffer. I'd rather suffer. I'd rather reign in hell than I'd rather burn in hell than reign in heaven. Is that
better to reign in hell than to serve in heaven? Yeah, it's that's Milton. I was gonna bring up some Paradise Lost because I personally have thought a lot about how Paradise Lost, I think, has a very significant impact on not just left hand magic, but like coming through to modern day Satanism, like LaVeyan Satanism and the Satanic Temple. Even though Satanic Temple is like considers himself a political organization, one of the most fascinating things to me about Paradise Lost is that it's Lucifer is a tragic hero, and he still like doesn't like he's still stricken down. Like the book begins with him stricken down and in hell, and then rising up, and then convincing Eve to eat the apple. But the interesting thing about it is like through the whole book, I don't know if anybody else read it like this, but like you're rooting for Lucifer, like because he's like, yeah, you know what? I am not going no, I am not sorry about taking a third of the angels and rebelling, because I still think I'm right. And you know what? I'm going to prove it.
That's awesome.
And it's really good. I highly recommend getting an audiobook too, like a really good audiobook of Paradise Lost, because like hearing a really good voiceover of anybody reading those Miltonian Lucifer lines is it's ear sex. That's what it is.
It's awesome.
And I think it kind of like Paradise Lost is really important to kind of thinking about like how left-hand path magic is, because it's not really about as far as like the Paradise Lost version or my own personal interpretation of left-hand path magic, it's not about necessarily becoming a god or the god. It's understanding yourself and your own effect on the world around you. And in my own understanding of the world, how you're able to, through your own perception and changing the perception of others, control the world through your own actions and your own self-actualization of both symbolism and material.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
These are wonderful concepts. I love that. This is really cool.
So it's such a sorry. No, we'll go right ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna go off on a separate tangent about mythology and Hinduism, but
I was just it's like
nice.
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing. That I believe it was the original members of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. They were the ones who brought Hinduism over to the West and started translating a lot of those texts and started engaging in those practices. And I know Crowley engaged in a lot of like tantric practices and like things like that.
And plenty of yoga.
Yeah.
Gotta stay
very limber to engage in a lot of the activities that he did.
Yeah.
Look at me, I can touch my toes. I'm sorry, Henry Zabrowski, for a bad impression of your impression.
But yeah, with Hinduism, like that's really even where we get the concept of left hand and right hand path magic through the introduction of Hinduism into Western magical practices. And that's also unfortunately where we end up getting this conflation between white and black magic and right and left hand path magic as just an oversimplification of very complicated and complex issues that a lot of dabblers into occulticism and mysticism in the early 1900s couldn't actually wrap their head around.
Indeed.
Yeah, it seems like when you're talking about these big philosophical concepts, that oversimplification is a dangerous thing when it comes to these kind of things. So,
yeah. You know what's interesting too? Like if you like read the old grimoires, you read like a lot of them are just like instruction manuals, but they're not like, there are aspects of it that can be altered. And like what I've come to realize with like any practice, like you should study the system and learn it and master it, but utilize it as a template. And ultimately you want to develop your own system. Or if you want to stick with the system, even if you practice it, you want to practice it with your own unique touch to it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I've brought it up on the podcast before, but there's a great relation to Bruce Lee's philosophy on martial arts. Like one of the maxims I live my life around is that he says that like in your life, when you're studying anything, you go from formlessness to form and then back to formlessness, because like you have no technique, you have to learn the technique well and in a sense, rigidly in order to understand the nature of a technique, of a martial art or anything. And then when you have that conscious capability, you can start to break that down into something that is formless or rhythmless or flexible. And that's what seems super cool about modern magic in a lot of ways, is that you can invent your own sigils. You can have this like background of knowledge in a whole bunch of different systems that become the thing that works for you.
Indeed. It's interesting that you brought up Bruce Lee, because Bruce Lee is one of the first martial artists to make me realize that there are other martial artists who have mastered the arts and become what I'd call adepts when it comes to martial arts. He's one, and I think Floyd Mayweather is one. And I know a lot of people don't like him, but I say this because he has a stylish style. Like, he adapts to whatever opponent he's fighting. Whatever situation he's in, he can adapt, and he adapts so quickly. He's like water. He can be life-giving, and like he can be subtly and calm, or he can come crashing as waves and destroy. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but like I feel like Bruce Lee, what he's mastered in martial arts, I see it in other fighters, and the principles that we see in magic, it can be applied in multiple different arts, from fighting to drawing to music.
Oh yeah, dude, unconscious competency is fascinating, especially like when you meet anybody who is at a high level of any skill, and like saying they don't have to think about it is an understatement. Things like I mean, you said you boxed before. There's something about being in a flow state with any particular skill, and I know, like, I know Josh has been there with writing. I've seen Will do it with art. I learned that my shortcut for getting into a flow state when I was rolling in jiu-jitsu back in the Stone Age, when everybody was my size, was like, I found out that if I closed my eyes and I took out, because the way we studied jiu-jitsu, like we always started on our knees in the randori, and we in free rolling rather, and so you're constantly in contact. But if I took away the thing that was like legitimately tricking me, and I just felt my opponent's body weight shift, I got more intuitive and more centered on what was going on at the time. And I was a blue belt. I had like when you like meet purple belts and black belts in literally anything, who like you could put them in a sensory deprivation head mask and they'd still kick your ass. Like that, like it's really cool when people are just like, oh yeah, like this is how I do it, like this is how I do a sigil, like, oh yeah, I know how to, like, oh yeah, like let's talk to Karanzan here, let me just draw this in the air, and then oh fuck, he's here. Like that would have been really bad real quick. It's like quick way to end the podcast. Carrie got eaten by Karanzan.
For those who are listening, and for Josh, what is Karanzan?
Karanzan is one of the is one of the greater demons in the Ars Goetia. He was one that Aleister Crowley attempted to summon and fight a couple of times.
Oh,
and Karanzan is supposed to be very, very wily. Karanzan is also represented very well in the first two volumes of the Neil Gaiman series Sandman. And it's a very interesting interpretation of Karanzan in that respect. So my demonology nerd is coming out.
It's awesome.
Yep.
So it's interesting. These demons, these spirits, for people who are like listening right now, and like this is your first time hearing these occult concepts. Spirits, demons, angels, try to view these things as energy, right? Different aspects of energy that express themselves differently, like have, through different forms. And these forms, right, are actually forms that we create, because this is the only way that we can perceive these energies, because we exist in material reality and they exist in the spiritual or the higher planes or the lower planes, etc. And even viewing as higher or lower is like, these are just ways that I'm trying to explain, concepts that our mind can't really fathom in our regular way of thinking.
Yeah, to go back to your occult scientist thing, like you're trying to explain like a 4-dimensional concept in a 3-dimensional world. Where it's like we have to look at something as up, down, outside, inside, dark, light, evil or good. But like it's that there's just the level beyond that kind of the Tesseract drawing is the thing that's coming to mind right now.
Yeah.
I mean, you're also really speaking my language, because I've talked with Will about this. I'm trying to write fantasy, and different interpretations of demons actually comes up a great deal, because I have seen artists do fantastic modern renditions of demons of the Ars Gratia, because those demons are like, I had this thought that the demons that are represented in the Ars Gratia, because you'll see like Osmodius, I want to say, is like a dude's head and a frog's head and a lion's head on like a toad's body. Yeah, and he's wearing, and like that's just one form. But I like how like it's not that that's literally what that entity looks like. That is the closest approximation that you could kind of understand to get the gist.
Indeed.
And that factors into like the way that I write magic in my books is like, even I want to present it like, even though I say there is a system, the system of magic in this particular universe, fantasy universe, is these people's attempts to classify something that in its essence is technically unclassifiable. Left turn into fiction. Brandon Sanderson, call me sometime.
That's awesome. Well, guys, we are just about out of time, but this has been a wonderful, wonderful podcast. And sorry, Will.
That's great.
Yeah. But Lucius, we want to have you back on another time. This was a wonderful conversation. I've learned a lot. I know our listeners have too. What's your one final thing you want to impart to our listeners before we end the podcast? What's kind of a thing of wisdom you want to give them, or something like that?
Well, I'll say in life, people will tell you to go left, they'll tell you to go right. But at the end of the day, it's up to you to traverse your own path. And your path doesn't have to look like anyone else's. Traverse your path and walk the pathless path.
That's awesome. That is a perfect closing note. Thank you so much. This has been a great podcast.
Thank you, Lucius.
Thanks for having me on, y'all.
Of course.
Good talk. Appreciate it.
Yeah.